Let me ask you something. Have you ever felt trapped by your job? Not because you hate it, but because you can't afford not to work. Like if your paycheck stopped, everything would unravel.
I know so many people are living in that exact spot right now. And maybe you're one of them. Working not because they want to, but because they have to. That's why today's episode is such a game changer.
We're talking about financial independence, what it actually means, how to figure out your numbers, and why it's not just for millionaires and early retirees. It's for anyone who wants freedom of choice.
Exactly. And we're going to be breaking down the 4% rule, how to track and understand your expenses, and the real driver behind reaching your financial independence faster.
And we're not just throwing math at you. We're showing you how to apply it using real numbers, real examples, and simple tools that anyone can use, even if you're just starting from scratch.
So whether you're just starting out on this journey or you've been chasing financial independence for a while, this episode is your roadmap. By the end of it, you're going to know your financial independence number, what's holding you back, and how to speed things up.
So let's get into it, because the sooner you understand this, the sooner you can stop surviving and start building a life of freedom. This is the Fi Guys. Let's get started. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about how to reach your financial independence numbers step by step. So before we get started on that, I want to first talk about what is financial independence really? So before we get into anything, I want to start off with our basics. Financial independence is when you have enough money invested to cover your lifestyle without needing to trade time for a paycheck. Now, you might be asking yourself, Chris, why does that matter? And if you are asking that, I would say, well, it's because financial independence isn't just about retiring early. It's about freedom of choice, peace of mind, and not getting stuck in survival mode, or what we like to call the hedonic hamster wheel, where you can never escape it. You're just going job to job to job, hoping that you can escape. And before we get into anything, the most important thing is, what is our foundation? I would argue that knowing your annual expenses is the foundation of achieving financial independence, because your expenses dictate how much you need to be free. What do you think, Dom?
You know, I think a lot of us have been in that situation where we wanted to do something, right? Whether that was, and I was sick and all I could do was go to urgent care. I couldn't get the best care. I couldn't go to the Mayo Clinic, right? You know, I wanted to get this. I wanted to get this set of knives, but the one I actually wanted was a Japanese set that never dulls and you can pass down, right? And I think all of us have been in a place where it's like, man, I feel like I deserve more. I feel like I deserve better. But our financial backing, you know, what holds us up, well, it's not there. You know, it doesn't match your reality. I think, honestly, probably all of us feel that. Maybe there are outliers, maybe those who reach the end, but I feel like even those who reach the end of FI, the treadmill keeps going, like Chris was saying. I think this is going to be a very, very important podcast today. And if I'm not mistaken, we are on the FI Crash Course, correct, Chris?
Yep, this is episode 2 of the FI Crash Course, actually FI Crash Course Remastered. So we're going through the entire 12-part series, and you're in for a treat. If you're just joining us on this second episode, please go back and listen to our first episode of the FI Crash Course. That was episode 110. We're just going to keep this going until we have exhausted ourselves and people know exactly what they need to do step by step on how to get themselves from where they are to where they want to be going.
And I feel like most people, it's not necessarily a matter of learning it for a certain percentage, for sure, yes. But I think a lot of it is actually, they just need to be reminded over and over and over till it sticks, right? I know some of the lessons that we've taught here and ones that I've learned here on the channel live in front of you guys, the reason they stick is because I keep hounding you. Chris keeps hounding you, right? And it's just over time, it's like, oh yeah, bing, 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 bing. I get it now, right? It took once to understand. It took 10 times to put into place, right? So we're trying to shorten that gap to where you actually implement it. So I'm excited to get into the meat and potatoes because I know this is a very important one. That's why we put it so close to the beginning of the FI Crash Course. So let's continue.
Yes, you're exactly right. This is an important one, and it is probably the most numbers-based one that we're going to end up doing. But I promise you to our guests, we're going to make it as simple as possible. Everything is going to be applicable. And we're not going to be talking about Fibonacci's and alphas and betas. It's all going to be simple numbers that you can apply to your life right now in order to get you from where you want to go, or from where you are to where you want to go. And just like Dominic said, oftentimes it's not the knowledge that holds us back. It's the consistency. So we're going to make this as simple as we can, because what we found is that complexity is the enemy of progress. So we need to make this as simple as we can so that you can remember it at all times. And with that being said, I want to talk about the 4% rule. And the 4% rule is your guiding light in financial independence. The 4% rule helps you to estimate how much you can safely withdraw from your investments each year with a high statistical likelihood of not running out of money. The 4% rule is rooted in research done from Trinity University. Now, this is something that's very important. The 4% rule is a starting point. It's not a guarantee. That's the reason that we at the Fi Guys have called it the 4% rule of thumb. It's not law. It's not universal. It's not truth, but it gets you a direction to be going. Because what most people do is they say, hey, eventually when I get there, I'm going to know that I'm there. But this gives you an actual direction.
You know, you said something right there at the end that I think is so interesting. I think it's top of minds for a lot of people, especially people who are just starting out, right? Well, Chris, I'll start once I'm making good money. I'll start once I'm making better money, right? I'm just barely surviving right now, right? You're saying that whether you're making good money or you're just in the beginning, or maybe you're just in high school, right? You haven't even gotten out of high school. Maybe you're just getting into college, maybe, right? You should still start, right? Kind of what I'm getting from you is, you know, it's better to ingrain in your life the good habits of financial upkeep and financial knowledge and good financial practices beforehand, because once you start making good money, right, it might not get easier to be better with your money. It might actually get harder now that you have access to, you know, buy things that you always wanted. Well, I deserve it. I worked so hard. I should splurge. I should take care of myself, right? It's like 100%, but to an extent. So I love what you're saying here. And I love what you were saying earlier about, you know, complexity is the enemy of progress. I love keeping it simple, right? And the people love keeping it simple. So let's continue on. But this is a good one. I'm loving what you're saying right now. I'm taking a little bit of notes, and I hope you guys are taking notes as well.
Well, I like to talk about how that 4% actually works. So what we've noticed over the past 100 so odd years of the stock market being available is if you put your money into a broad market index, and the Trinity study was actually based off of a 60-40 portfolio, meaning 60% equities, so stocks, and 40% bonds. Now, us in the financial independence community have changed that over time. And this is more recent that we're changing it back, that it was 100% equities, 0% bonds. But that was because for a long time, bonds weren't returning anything. But now in 2025, we're starting to see a different change. So when things change, we update. But with the stock market and bonds returning around 9 to 10% per year, that means that you're able to withdraw. And then we even in financial independence, we even pull that number back to 7, just to be like worst case scenario. Let's say we're only getting 7%. That means that I can withdraw 4% from my portfolio and still keep 3% in there. 4 plus 3 is 7 in order to keep up with inflation, because inflation historically has been around 2%. So we even put another buffer on top of it by saying, moving forward, what if inflation was at 3%? And the nice thing about the Trinity study is it has a 98% accuracy of being able to make it, even if you come into the worst time. But the nice thing about us here in the financial independence community is that most people never retire off of just the 4% rule. They usually have an ace in the hole, myself included. I have Mons on Wealth. I have other businesses that I'm working on in order to bring in money, because you don't want to get to a point where I have all this money and I'm just not going to do anything with it. So the formula in order to find the 4% rule is actually very, very simple. I know that people have tried to make it as complex as possible, but we're going to simplify it so you know what you're doing. All you need to do is multiply your yearly expenses by 25 times. And once you have that, you have your financial independence number. And in just a second, we're going to show you how it works. But I want to give you a quick example, and I'll give the floor back to Dominic. So let's say that you say that your expenses, and you've tracked it, is $40,000 a year. If you times $40,000 by 25, you get $1 million. Therefore, you can say my financial independence number is $1 million. That doesn't mean when you reach $1 million, you get to walk into your boss's office, flip the desk and say, I'm out of here. But at least you have a goal. At least you're not listening to Susie Irwin, who's saying, oh, in order to retire, you need $16 million and a fleet of jets. Because at that point, most people give up before even trying.
Yeah, I think that's such a dangerous thing to lose hope. Saying that you need $16 million, right? And what's so interesting about that is like, that might be true for somebody, right? They want to live a super lavish lifestyle, drawing 4% off of that. And you could live a very lavish lifestyle of 16 million, no doubt, no doubt. But most of us don't need 16 million to live the life that we want. And I love that. So 4% rule, the expenses times 25. So simple, super simple. Now you know it. Now you know it. Now you can go to the workplace and be like, hey, I know the 4% rule. You know about that? You heard about that? You know the rumors surrounding it? Now you do.
So in order to find that, we need to know our FI numbers, right? In order to know that, we need to know everything. So your FI numbers, quite simply, is equal to your expenses times 25. Simple math, life-changing insights. But what's the catch of this? The catch of this is the more you spend, the more you need. And the inverse is the less you spend, the faster you reach financial independence. That's the reason that here in America, so many people can never get out of it. Because as their income increases, so does the amount of spending that they live at. That's the reason that most people find themselves in this rat race. That's the reason that here at the FI Guys, yes, bringing in money is important. And how you choose to spend that money is important. We have two levers to pull from. Too many people pull from one lever, thinking, oh, the problem is I'm not making enough money. I just need to make more money, make more money, make more money. But as they make more money, their income increases, their expenses increase in lockstep, if not their expenses outpacing their income potential. So just to make this simple, if you are able to cut your expenses from $4,000 a month to $3,000 a month, and in the rest of the FI Crash Course, we're going to talk about different ways to cut those expenses, ways to help you. We're going to talk about all of that. But if you're just able to decrease your expenses from 4 to 3, $1,000 a month, you are able to lower your financial independence numbers by just about $300,000.
Wow. That's unbelievable. That is unbelievable. It's amazing how much of those little changes, right, can have such a big impact, right? And I'm not saying like $1,000 isn't a little change. Like that's a big change, right? That's 25% of 4,000, right? But it just goes to show that little efforts, little changes can really, really, really just be a tsunami of success down the road.
And it's little changes stacked up over time. I think one of the worst things that I found is that when people find financial independence and they discover like, I can take control of my life. And it's like this with everything. Same with fitness, same with anything. You find something that you're like, this is going to change my life. And you go into it so hard. You're like, hey, I have this New Year's resolution. I want to lose 60 pounds this year. I'm going to go to the gym 10 times a day. I'm just going to just run everywhere. And then by January 10th, you've quit. It's the same thing that people do for financial independence. Like, you know what I'm going to do? I found this thing. We're going to move into an apartment. We're going to downgrade into a studio. We're going to live off of ramen for the next 10 years. And then we're going to be able to achieve financial independence. And then most people end up quitting a month or two in because they've degraded their life to such a point that they don't want to continue living. And this is the hard part, finding the balance. How do we live for today while also planning for tomorrow? And this is where most people come in and they have their rules of this is what you must do. This is how you can, this is how you should do it. What we always say is this are ways. These are ways to do it. And you have to find the right way for you. Because there are no solutions. There are only trade-offs. And what trade-offs I'm willing to make, what trade-offs Dominic's willing to make, what trade-offs our listener is willing to make is going to be completely different. So no way is right, no way is wrong. They're just different. And that difference is where everything comes in. That difference is what makes personal finance personal.
So would you recommend writing down a list of things you're willing to sacrifice in order to get to your goal? Or do you have any tips and tricks on kind of how to manage that a little bit better? Because 10 years of ramen sounds brutal, impossible to sustain, impossible.
I think that's a good one. One thing that I often ask my coaching clients, this is after we figure out what their why is. And of course, you have to go back to episode 1 to figure that out. One of the questions I'll ask them is, what are you willing to sacrifice in order to achieve what you want. And most people at that point will say, oh, I'm willing to sacrifice anything. I'll do anything to do it. And I'll go like, okay, cool. So can we get rid of the kids? Because that'll definitely like reduce your independence summer. And they're like, oh,
Yeah.
what are you talking about? Of course I'm not willing to do that.
Yeah.
So rather than asking the question, what are you willing to do? Ask this question. What am I not willing to do? Because at least once you have those non-negotiables, you can say like, okay, if I'm not willing to sell the house, if I'm not willing to sell the car, if I'm not willing to do these things, what else can I do in order to fix it? But before we even get there, I think there's an easier thing to do before we start figuring out how am I going to cut? What am I going to do in order to do that? And that is track every dollar. And yes, I mean every freaking dollar. And I'm not saying forever. I'm not saying till infinity. I'm not saying to your death day. I'm saying that we need to start for at least 30 to 90 days because you can't change that which is not measured. I want you to think of it as a GPS for your money. You have no destination without having a starting point. Most people go through their life without a starting point, hoping that eventually I will reach the destination, that I will get there. But anywhere you go, there you are. And if you don't know where you're trying to get to, you're never going to know that you've made it. So there are so many different tools, from Google Sheets to Monarch Money to YNAB to just creating your own little spreadsheet. Shoot, if you want to grab a pen and paper and start writing it down, you can do that. In future podcasts, we will break down which tools are best based on your style. But in today's episode, I just want you to be able to start tracking. Because once you start tracking, you can start to see where's my money going. Because most people have no idea. Most people still are running off of, a thing of eggs costs like $2. A cheeseburger costs like $1 because we're running off of what it used to be, not what it is now. The amount of times I've had clients who say like, oh yeah, we spend like $300 a month on eating out a month, maybe $30. And then we look at it and it's like $3,000. And they're like, well, that's why we can't save any money, because they're not actually looking at things. Now, ideally you do this for an entire year, but I understand that telling someone to track your money for a year is a daunting task. So can we do it for 30 days and times it by 12? Can we do it for 90 days and times it by 4? There are ways to go about getting this done. You just need to start. Start messy, start often, but just start. What do you think, Dom?
I think you're spot on. I think there's never going to be a perfect plan. There's never going to be a perfect storm where it's like, oh, everything is perfect. Now is the time to start. I spent a lot of my life before kind of educating myself, waiting for that perfect storm. And I know you guys have too, right? And it sucks because I wish someone would come, grab you, hold your hand like, hey, this is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to do it. We're just going to press this button and it's going to be done and everything's going to be okay. I long for that. Hasn't happened yet, right? So you got to take life by the reins. You got to take it by the horns and really just start today. Today is the day. This podcast is your sign from the universe that today is the perfect storm. And it's best to start right now. And you guys know what I'm going to say. And you're probably going to hate what I'm going to say. And Chris knows what I'm about to say, right? The best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago, right? Second best, well, that's today, right? Maybe 20 years ago, you didn't need to track your expenses because mom and dad were doing something with it, right? But it's always good to start early. Start now. So no more procrastination. Let's start right now. Grab a pen and paper. And honestly, right, like what you were saying, Chris, you can go through a few different apps and that's super helpful for sure. And Google spreadsheets works great for a lot of people. I don't even mind pulling up the bank statement and just on a giant piece of paper, right? I've got a big piece of paper right here that I write my notes on and just going like line items. All right. How much was this? Where's this going? What's this? What's that? And I'm going to be honest, you're going to find things that I don't know where that came from. I don't know what that is. Where is that? What is that? Did I get hacked? What is all this, tomfoolery? So it's definitely a great thing to start now.
And I'm not just saying, go ahead and just track your money and then just be like, all right, I tracked it. I'm not going to look at it. After we track our money, we have to categorize. We have to analyze like a professional. That means that you have to review your spending and group it into categories. What I do is discretionary, non-discretionary. I do food, I do rent, I do fun, I do subscriptions, I do whatever I need to. There's so many different ways. There's self-care, there's non-self-care. There's no right or wrong way to get this done. The important thing is that you do it for yourself. We've had a listener who realized they were spending over $300 a month in unused subscriptions. Just by tracking for a month, they were able to find all that, and then there's boom, instant savings. Just by doing this for a month, they tracked it and they're like, whoa, what? Where did this come from? It was kind of funny. The husband actually called. He let me know that he went to his wife and he's like, who signed up for this? What is this? Why are we spending all this money on these things? And it was a golf subscription. He walked into a golf store. He signed a thing in order to like get a free something or other. Totally forgot about it. He was spending like $120 a month on a golf subscription that he had no idea that he was spending. So our challenge is to pick one category and try to cut back for it for 90 days. Find one category, go back through your expenses and see, hey, is this something that I want to continue spending on? Is this something that is worth increasing my financial independence? Remember that small changes equals really big impact. What do you think, Dominic, before we move on to our sixth section about savings rate?
I feel like we're going by so fast. I'm kind of sad. We're getting close to the end. But no, I like what you're saying. I think all of it's pretty actionable. I think it's all that's very reasonable. I don't think anything you're asking is absurd or impossible. And I think that's what's so scary to some people is what you're asking is it's fair. It's reasonable. It's actionable, right? But that means people actually have to go do it now. And that can be very scary. But most of fear lives in the mind. There's this quote that I'm trying to remember what it is. Layla Hormozi said it once and I really liked it, but fear is a mile wide and an inch deep. So big, bad, and scary, huge fear. But as soon as you tackle it, I'm not going to drown. It's only an inch deep. So let's get after it. Let's tackle it. And let's get on to this next point.
I think of how many people go through life being upset that they aren't where they want to be. Saying like, oh, it's everyone else's fault, is all these things, where the one thing that you have control over is how you're going to react to it. Are you going to sit there and be angry and upset that this isn't the way that I want it to be? Or are you going to actually take life by the horns? At some point, people need to take personal responsibility and say that I want to be the change that I want in my life. The one common thing in all of these issues is me. And that's tough to take some, a la Jocko Willink, extreme ownership and go ahead and start to track in order to make that change. Because your brain, you have a 10,000-year-old brain in a modern day body. It knows that right now, while you are unhappy with your finances, at least you are alive. It does not know on the other side where you have money, where you are less stressed, if you are still going to be able to survive. And I can promise you, from doing this with hundreds of clients, for doing this and helping people for years here on the Fi Guys, no one has ever reached out to me and saying, hey, Chris, tracking my expenses, doing all this stuff, saving more money has made my life worse. People have taken it to extremes and they've shot themselves in the foot by over saving, by doing things like that, and said like, oh, I'm not enjoying my life anymore. And the nice thing is all they had to do was just kind of go back, just to thread the needle a little bit more and live like the normal person does. What's the normal way of doing things? The normal way is you go 60 years of your life working, and hoping that somebody else is going to come, spending everything that you make, if not more. And then going on Medicare, Medicaid, and just believing that someone else is going to save you. It's not working, and it's going to continue to get worse. Our generation, millennials, Gen Z, we are the first generation who most likely will have it worse than our parents did. So it is on us to figure it out. We can sit here and lament it and complain all day, every day about how shitty this is. And I agree. And the question still comes down to, and what are you going to do? And what you can do about it is start to learn how to do these things. Start to figure out your savings rate, because your savings rate is your real financial independence superpower. Your savings rate is the number one driver to how fast you reach financial independence. Think of it like filling a bucket. The faster you fill it, the sooner it overfills. With freedom, with the ability to choose what you want to do with your life. The two-part formula is spend less and save more. It's really as simple as that. Too many people try to overcomplicate it. All we have to do is try to make more money, spend less money. What's our old equation that we've always used to say? A plus B equals C. If A is make more money, B is minus spend less money, equals the gap, equals your driver to financial independence. That number, that savings rate, dictates everything here in financial independence.
I'm glad to hear that it's broken down by this super simple math equation. Finally, 15 years of math is kind of paying off, right? I got multiplication, addition, division, and now we have this beautiful formula. A plus B, A minus B equals C. And I love that. So income minus expenses equals your burn rate. It's good to know. That's good to know. Yeah, I taking a lot of notes here, and I hope you guys are too. And if you are, and there's something in this that has kind of stuck out with you so far, feel free to leave it in the comments. If you're watching on YouTube, if you're on Spotify, there are comments on Spotify, weirdly enough. But yeah, feel free to drop a comment on which one's kind of resonating with you and maybe inspire someone to start today. And I'm excited. I'm excited for you guys. I'm super excited to get started today because, man, what better day? This is your sign from the universe. Let's start today.
So in order for us to know how much we're saving each month, we need to have a way to calculate our savings rate. So I'm going to give you a pretty easy formula to know what percentage is my savings rate, because most people go off percentage, not off hard numbers. Because some people that go off hard numbers, they're like, hey, I'm saving $1,000 a month. And that sounds wonderful. But if you're making $1 million a month and you're only saving $1,000, that's not a good ratio. So percentages is usually the way that we want to go about doing it. Now, say you're making $2,000 a month and you're saving $1,000 a month. Hell, you're doing an amazing job. That's a 50% savings rate versus a 1% savings rate. Two very different things depending on you, the individual, not general, you as an individual. So how do we calculate our savings rate? Well, first I want to talk about net income versus gross income. Here at the Fi Guys, we often talk about net income because net income is what you actually take home after taxes, after Social Security, after all the stuff that gets pulled out. So the formula to calculate your savings rate is we have to take our annual savings. How much money did we save at the end of the year? And that can go into a savings account, into investments, into our IRAs, into our 401ks, into whatever, and divide that by our net income. What did we actually take home? And then we times that by 100. And that equals your actual savings rate. Now, I understand that giving numbers like that over a podcast is not the best way of doing it. So let me give you an example. If you earned $60,000 after taxes that got to you, and you saved $10,000 over the course of the year, that would mean that your savings rate is 16.7%. I had to take my annual income, divide it by how much I saved, and then times it by 100 to get the percentage that I want. Does that sound pretty easy, Dominic?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think math is scary to a lot of people, right? And sometimes myself. I think that's doable. I think the audience would agree. They're just numbers, guys, right? They might seem scary, right? But they're not going to come out and bite your arm off, right? If you were dealing with a lion, on the savannah, I'd be like, well, we might have something to be worried about here. This could be a real issue. This could be a problem. This thing could kill us. But the numbers aren't going to kill you, right? The diving in and doing a live autopsy of your finances, it's not going to kill you. It shouldn't kill you. It's not going to kill you. It's not going to kill you. So, yeah, no, that's super doable. I think that equation really simplifies it. I think that really simplifies it, Chris.
Nice. And before we move on, I really want to explain to you why savings rate matters so much, why it really is the superpower of financial independence. And in order to do that, I need to introduce one of our best friends in the financial industry, and that is compound interest. And very simply, what compound interest means is your money earns money on itself. Think of a snowball. And if the snowball stays the same size and it rolls down the hill, it's not going to get much bigger. But as the snowball goes down the hill, it brings more snow. And that snow allows it to accumulate more snow. And that snowball gets bigger and bigger and bigger until we have an avalanche that can take out a house. You can do that exact same thing with your money. If you save $1,000 and you assume 8% per year growth, that means that at the end of the year, you will have $1,080 next year. Now, if you take that again, and you take it again, and you take it again, 8% year over and over and over again, you can see that combination will get bigger and bigger and bigger. Eventually, we're going to get to the rule of 72, the rule of 105. We will talk about all of these things in the Fi Crash Course. I promise that. But I want to keep it as simple as we possibly can. Now, when we think about the combo of a high savings rate and compounding interest, it is freaking rocket fuel that gets you to financial independence. What was the old adage that everyone was taught growing up? You need to save 10% of your income, and that will get you to financial independence. That will get you to retire. And that was all well and good back then. At 10%, that means that you will probably work on average for 51 years. For many of us, that is not good enough. And it's even worse now because that was also brought into the fact where people had pensions. People had fully funded Social Security. Those things are gone. We used to have a 3-legged stool for retirement, and now we have like a 1.5-legged stool. So it's up to us to try to make sure that that one leg that we're sitting on is as wide as possible, so that we can have like just a really big seat that just sits down directly to the floor. Now, Dominic and I, or at least I, am looking at a savings rate chart, and I will put this inside the show notes in case our audience wants to see it. But if you have a 5% savings rate, that means you're going to be working for 66 years. 20% savings rate, 37 years. 40% savings rate, 22 years. 50% savings rate, 17 years. You can see that as we increase our savings rate, so does the number of years that we work. So that means that our savings rate is the more important thing than how much money we're making. Because you could be making $1 million a year. Shit, $1 billion a year. But if you are not saving any of it, or you're only saving 5 to 10%, because the rest of it's getting spent, you're never going to make it. This is where someone who is a janitor, a ditch digger, can outpace or become more financially literate or financially well off than someone who's making substantially more money. Because your savings rate is what dictates everything. If you are somehow able to save 90% of your income, that means that you can retire in under 3 years. I'm not saying it's easy, but I'm saying that these are things that are possible. So rather than looking at it of, it's all impossibility, you can now see that I can do this. And the nice thing is, as we increase our savings rate, it increases everything, because that means we have to live off of less. If we live off of less, our number gets smaller. It all increases. It all works on top of each other. And the biggest thing that comes into this is, how much are you spending? That's the reason that we talk about savings rate so much, because it all works together. So if we pull all of this together into a FI game plan, once you know your expenses, once you know your savings rates, and you know your financial independence number, how can we actually put a plan in place? If we spend $40,000 a year, that means that our financial independence number is $1 million. Based on the 4% rule, I can pull off $40,000 the first year, $40,000 plus 3% the next year, and we can continue to pull that off indefinitely with a 98% chance of working. And most people do not just retire based off that. Remember that the 4% rule is a rule of thumb. Financial independence isn't just for millionaires and billionaires. It's for anyone willing to put intention behind their money, to live intentionally with their life. Before we get to the action step, Dominic, what are you thinking?
I think I just want to clarify something. I'm hoping people aren't getting the wrong idea, right? It's all about save as much as you can and live as small as you can. And it's our only goal is to live for tomorrow. Like that's definitely not what we're preaching. Definitely not what we're preaching. But it's like everything, right? It's a balance. It's a balancing act of, hey, well, we have to, like, tomorrow, statistically, it's going to be here, right? And the day that it isn't here, well, it doesn't matter anyways. So, statistically, it's going to be there, right? But at the same time, you can't live in tomorrow. You can only live in today. And part of what we're talking about today, part of what we're teaching today is becoming disciplined with your money so that you can live a life on your terms. Part of it is I gotta know my numbers, right? Gotta know my burn rate. I gotta know my savings rate. I gotta know what the 4% rule could look like for me, how much to save, all this fun stuff, tracking stuff. Awesome, right? But it is a balance, right? Of, hey, like, we've got to look after ourselves, right? Only we can look after ourselves, but also only we can do what's right for us and have fun too, right? I know you talked a lot about, not today on today's episode, but in past episodes, right? You and your wife, right? The yin and yang, right? You are, you're a big saver, you're big on tomorrow, and your wife is big on today, right? And with the two, fire and ice, right? It's the perfect dynamic, right? If you were both, carefree and like live in the moment, well, financially, you could have some trouble, right? And if you were both super savers, well, spiritually you might be in trouble too, right? So you need that dynamic. And I'm not saying that if you're in a relationship and both of you are penny pinchers, like you're cooked. It's not what I'm saying, right? Not what I'm saying at all. But it's a balance. It's a balance of enjoying today, but also planning for tomorrow. And I just want to make sure that's 100% clear before we get on to the action step of the day.
Thank you, Dominic. And that's the reason that our first episode of the Fight Crash Course was all about your why. It was about figuring out what's the reason that you're doing this. Because I'm going to say, if you're on this financial independence journey and at any moment you're like, F this is the worst thing I'm ever doing, then you're doing it wrong. This should not be detriment. This should not be pain. This should not be suffering. This should be fun. This should be controlling your life. It's the same way of like working out. If you go and you're like, hey, I like going to CrossFit, I like going to jiu-jitsu, I like doing these workouts, you are far more likely to stick with it. But if you're the person that is like, I'm going to go to the gym and I'm going to do things that I absolutely hate because I want the end goal, you are not going to stick with it. We are not robots. We can't just stick through things. We have emotions. We have to make sure that we're doing things in line with our own values and what works for us. That's the reason that blanket statements of this is what you must do in order to achieve something do not work. Because everyone is different. What you're willing to do is different. There are no solutions. There are only trade-offs. I'm going to say it 1,000 different times. What you're willing to do is different than me. It's different from Dominic. And that's okay. Rather than telling you what you need to do, I'd rather tell you what you ought to do. What people have done in the past that has worked for them. And then you get to take it and figure out what's best for you. But you need to be a scientist in your own life. I'm not saying to just take my things as truth and just be like, well, Chris said it, Dominic said it, I have to do it. No, apply it to your own life and see if it works. If it works, continues it. If it doesn't work, reiterate and try to figure it out. Too many people try it. They apply it to their life and they're like, it didn't work and I quit. Maybe it didn't work because you didn't apply the right thing. So our action step for this week is, I'm sure you guys already have an idea. I want you to track your expenses. And I'm not asking you to track your expenses for the next 30 days, for the next 90 days, for the next year. I'm asking you to do it for 1 week. Track your expenses for 1 week. See what's going on. And then after that week, go ahead and just look back at it. Is all the spending in line with what you want? Is there anything on there that surprises you? Is there subscriptions that need to be canceled? Are you saying like, oh, I normally only spend $10 a day on food, but when I look at this, it says like $60. What's wrong? Is it the thought that I have in my head that I'm only spending $10? Or is the hard math, the hard numbers that's written down on this paper or on this spreadsheet, is that more correct? Because the ability for ourselves to lie to ourselves is incalculable. Most people believe that it's so easy to lie to other people. The easiest person for us to lie to is ourselves. And that's what tracking your money does. It takes those lies, it takes the things that you tell yourself in secret and hoping that it's not real, and it sheds light on it. And once the light is shed on it, you get to choose if you want to keep it that way or if you want to change it. But at least it gives you the freedom of choice. Right now, you don't have it. Dominic, before we close out, do you have anything to say?
You know, one of the things you mentioned about a minute ago, gamifying it, is what came to mind, right? It's not a one size fits all. And maybe you were recommended something that just didn't fit for you, right? Maybe here's an example. And I love the example you were giving about working out. I think it's a perfect analogy, right? If I'm new to fitness and I want to get healthy, you know, I know what I'll do. I'm going to try Pilates, right? I'm going to go and try Pilates. But that's the only thing I'm allowed to do. My entire perspective on getting healthy and fitness is going to be warped, right? Because let's say Pilates is not for me, like most guys, right? That's a torturous, that is crazy work. I'd like to try it again, but that's crazy stuff.
It's tough, man. It kills me.
Brutal.
I can't do it.
It's so brutal.
Yeah,
I don't know what those ladies are doing over there. It's brutal. It's crazy. It's ridiculous. But say like, you know, in your mind, this is what working out is. It's pain and suffering with these machines and, you know, attractive ladies all around. No comment. Don't tell my wife. But that being said, you're going to think that it's like, oh, this is just what it is. I guess I'm just going to suffer for, oh, how long do I need to be healthy for? Oh, my whole life. Hey, I'll just suffer for my whole life. It's like, no. There's different ways to be healthy. There's different ways to be financially healthy, right? You know, maybe you're more of a, you know, machines guy. Maybe you like swimming. Maybe you like biking. Maybe you like just, you know, throwing some rack of weights on and just, you know, repping them out or doing whatever, right? So I think that's one of the things that turns most people off about finance. It's like, well, Chris, I tried it one way and it didn't work. It's like, totally, right? You know, I had a bad steak once, right? I don't curse all cows. I don't curse all meat. Not all meat is bad, you know. It's just that one just wasn't for you. Maybe it was a little bit too chewy. Maybe it was burnt. Maybe it was raw. I don't know. And maybe the finance aspect of it is maybe it was just too complicated for you the way you were doing it before. I mean, with the advancements in AI and all the things that are happening in the world so quickly, I mean, it's a new world than it was, honestly, a year ago. So I think now is the best time to come back and really reevaluate and just get back on track with your finances. It's the best time to start is today, right? And it's getting annoying to say it, but I'm sure it's getting annoying to hear it, but the best time to start it today. You know, it would have been great 2 weeks ago, but hey, the past is the past and we can't change it. So let's start today to change the future.
Thank you, Dominic. I think it was beautifully said. I'm looking forward to talking more about this on Five Friday Feedback. I want to get more philosophical on it and try to figure out why is it that people hold themselves back? What is all of these things and how can we maybe make it easier? Because what I don't like is that so many people go through life and they hear all of these other quote unquote financial professionals, financial experts telling them this is the only way to do it. And I want to explore where is it that they're coming from and why is it that everyone speaks with so much certainty and everyone's way is right and everyone's way is wrong simultaneously. So we'll talk about that on Five Friday Feedback. So to our listeners, I hope you got value today. Please smash that like button, leave a comment, go to thefiguys.com if you want to be featured on Five Friday Feedback. Hit that feedback tab and write to your heart's content. And most importantly, if you got any value today, please bring a friend along for the journey. Tell somebody about the Fi Guys. This is the perfect time for them to come into this. If they're confused about what financial independence is, I recommend going back to episode 100, Welcome to the Fi Guys, where we talk about the 5 pillars of financial independence. And if they really want to get started, all they have to do is start one episode behind, one episode back. I guess 2 episodes back if you include Five Friday Feedback. But start at episode 110, where we get started on this Fi crash course. Because we're only 2 episodes in and we've already learned so much. And I can't wait to see where people are at the end of this journey. But just know at the end of this journey, you are just at the start of the journey. And that's what makes it so fun. So I'm Chris. He's Dominic. We're the Fi Guys. We'll see you on Friday. Later.
Peace.
This video podcast is sponsored by Monzon Wealth. The content in this podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered financial advice. We do not endorse specific products or services. Past performance does not guarantee future results. The opinions expressed are those of the hosts and guests, not the podcast sponsor.
It is crucial to consult with a qualified financial advisor or professional who can provide advice tailored to your specific needs before making any financial decisions, investments, or taking any other actions. If you are seeking specified help, you can reach out to Chris at monzonwealth.com.